For Want of Caution by Mayimpa. Chapter 6. What's Left When You Are Done? Sleep came slowly to Hob that night. He was constantly aware of the nearness of the guards, of Dream's eyes on him, of the precious presence tucked between him and the stone, and how little it would take for everything to fall even further apart. Hob laid down and curled up around the column on his side, ensuring that his coat remained shielding Jessamy. In response, Jessamy shuffled up and laid alongside Hob's chest, tucking her head into the crook of his neck. Hob gently laid his arm over her, cradling her closely to him, still unsure if it would be welcome. He heard her let out a little huff, but she didn't move, and he felt the delicate rise and fall of her chest gently slow and even out into rest. The soft warmth of air on his face was hypnotic, soothing, and comforting, reminding him that he wasn't alone in this place. He could feel his own lungs slow, unconsciously matching Jessamy's, and it finally pulled him over into sleep. The first thing he was aware of was light and warmth. He slowly opened his eyes, feeling no need for fear or pain. There was no need to rush, not here. All around him, as far as the eye could see, grew long blades of the softest, greenest grass, blowing in waves with the wind. A lone tree that he was currently lying under was the only thing that broke up the otherwise perfectly blue sky, although he distantly knew that if he concentrated hard enough, he could manifest large, fluffy white clouds in whichever shape he so desired. He recognized this place, although it had easily been 350 years since he had last seen it. He wasn't even sure if it was still in existence anymore, or if it had been lost to time like so many other places. He had last been here with his Eleanor, heavily pregnant at the time, and his young Robin. The three of them had taken a picnic in one of the more idyllic fields of their country manor. It had been one of the moments in his long life where he realized that he was living his version of heaven, and not even the pain and death that had come in the following months was enough to taint the memory. There was a rustling in the leaves above his head, and Hob looked up, spotting Jessamy on one of the overhead branches, preening her feathers. "Jessamy?" Hob asked, delighted. The bird stopped in her ministrations at the sound of his voice and looked down on him. "Hello, sweetheart." She tilted her head at that, but then suddenly looked away towards the field.
"Jessamy,"
a voice cried out. Standing out starkly against the bright green surroundings was Dream. He raced over towards the both of them, the long grass parting before him as if the very land was loath to impede his progress. It wasn't fast enough for the raven, though, as she leapt off the branch, soaring over to Dream's. "My lord!" Hob stared. "What?" Dream caught the little bird as she collided with him, no sign that the talking bird was in any way unusual for him. He brought his forehead to hers, eyes closing at the contact.
"I almost lost you, little one."
His voice was wrecked anguish and fear fighting with overwhelming relief.
"And there was nothing that I could do."
Her head drooped in shame. "I'm so sorry that I let you down."
"No."
His objection was immediate and absolute.
"It is I who have let you down. It is my job to protect you, Jessamy, and it is one that I have failed miserably at. You should have never been in this position, and I will never forgive myself for what might have happened."
Jessamy puffed up, clearly upset at his self-blame. Hob stepped forward, lest he allow the conversation descend into a never-ending spiral of unnecessary guilt. "Or we could blame the actual person who was holding us captive," Hob suggested. Dream's head snapped up towards him.
"Hob,"
the man gasped. Suddenly Hob found his arms full as the other man desperately hugged him.
"Thank you."
Hob stood in shock, unsure if he was allowed to return the hug or not.
"I am forever in your debt,"
Dream continued.
"Whatever boon you wish, tell me and you shall have it."
Hob pulled out of the hug, looking Dream in the face. "Yeah, no, that's not how this works. You will never have to thank me not for this." Dream met his eyes, watery blue, searching his face.
"Did you mean what you said to the young Burgess?"
I'm startled. "To Alex."
"When you said that you'd rather die than allow evil to go unchallenged. Did you mean it?"
"You caught that, didn't you?" Hob said, acutely aware that he was talking to the one person that could ensure that he actually followed through on that statement. "I mean, yeah, I've already done that once, and it will haunt me for the rest of my life.
I can't survive doing that again.
Dream stared at him, but said nothing. So, do beds usually talk around you? Hob said, desperate to move on in the conversation. Dream smiled, but allowed Hob the shift.
Not usually, no. But Jessamy is my raven. She is my eyes and ears in the waking world, and it would be entirely inconvenient if she couldn't communicate with me. I believe that she would have spoken with you before now, but as a being partially of the dreaming, and my connection to the dreaming nearly severed by the binding circle, I can hardly sense her this near to me, much less facilitate her conversations with others.
Can I break the circle now, my lord? Jessamy asked from her perch in the tree.
Absolutely not.
Dream snapped, taking Hob aback.
The risk is far too high. The gods are still watching, and they check the integrity of the binding multiple times a day, and we still do not have a way of breaking the glass.
Jessamy puffed up in indignation, and Hob couldn't blame her.
Now, hold on. Breaking the circle would at least accomplish something. It would give us more options, and at least you would have access to your power again. I said no, Hob. Even with access to my power, I have been weakened, and there is no guarantee that I would be able to free myself and guarantee both of your safety. It could still be worth the risk,
Hob argued. Dream looked incensed.
No, it is not. I forbid it. Well, that's not just for you to decide. No. Come on, enough,
Dream thundered.
This dream is over.
Hob startled awake. He lifted his head up to find Dream glaring at him through the glass. As much as he wanted to continue the argument, he knew that it was a lost cause, at least for the moment, and lay back down. The tension in the room was oppressive for the rest of the day. Not only could Hob feel that Dream was still mad at him, but Hob and the guards could hear Roderick Burgess yelling through the stone ceiling, and everyone knew that it was only a matter of time before the enraged man would make his way downstairs. The only question was just exactly how furious he would be by the time that he joined them, and how badly they would all be made to pay for it. Yet to their surprise, Roderick Burgess did not make an appearance. Instead, Alex did, bringing down food and water for Hob multiple times a day. On the first day, Alex handed the bread and water to Hob in silence, studiously avoiding eye contact with him. On the second day, he brought the bread and water, but there was also a small cube of cooked meat hidden with the bundle. Alex met Hob's eyes for the briefest of seconds before skittering away again, pausing only momentarily on the lump of black feathers hiding behind Hob. He then fled the room, leaving behind a befuddled Hob. After cautiously taking a bite of the cube himself, poison is never a fun experience, and feeling no strange effects, he passed the meat over to Jessamy, who ate it with a ravenous hunger. On the third day, Alex stopped by the guard's desk, and Hob watched with amused interest as the boy pulled his shoulders back in a clear attempt at copying the arrogant confidence that came so naturally to Roderick Burgess. "Leave us," Alex commanded. "I will speak with the prisoner alone." Oh, kid, the authoritative tone was not one that Alex could pull off. One of the guards snorted. "No way in hell, Alex." "You dare to go against the wishes of the Magus?" Alex questioned, still attempting to hold on to the facade of control. "No, I don't, which is why we won't be leaving," the other guard replied. "But the Magus said for us to stay here." The guard interrupted. "I won't end up like Edward Davies, Alex." The young man deflated. "I understand, Lawrence." He walked over to Hob and handed him the parcel of bread, water, and a slightly larger slice of meat, which Hob slipped to a very excited Jessamy. He then walked towards the exit, but before he could leave, one of the guards grabbed his arm and stopped him. "You aren't the Magus yet, Alex. Don't do anything stupid." Alex stared at the other man for a second, and then nodded, slowly trudging his way up the stairs. On the fourth day, Alex did not stop at the guard's desk. He did, however, hand only the bread and water to Hob. It's to Jessamy herself that he handed a larger, rawer slice of meat, the bird hidden between the two of them from the prying eyes of the guards. Hob watched as Alex held his breath while Jessamy tilted her head from side to side, contemplating the food. The smile and shine in Alex's eyes when Jessamy took the meat from his hand was breathtaking, and achingly reminded Hob of another boy that he had once known. On the fifth day, Alex did not come down alone. A thunderous Roderick Burgess stormed down the stairs with his son trailing down behind him, Hands empty. The man spared no glances for the guards or Hob, but instead made his way directly to Dream. "Where's the bird?" he ordered at Dream. Hob was instantly aware of the body right behind him, shrouded underneath the dark fabric, her body heat searing against his side. Dream remained motionless, not showing any sign that Roderick was in the room at all. "Where's Jessamy?" he asked again, his voice rising. Hob risked a look over at Alex, who looked about as terrified as Hob himself felt. Still, Dream did nothing. "I think that you've forgotten that you are not alone down here anymore," Burgess said, looking over towards Hob, who felt his whole body freeze at the dark look of promise on his face. "I'll give you one more chance. Where is the fucking bird?" Still, Dream remained silent. "Fine then," he addressed the glass prison. "What happens next is on you." Burgess turned around slowly and walked over towards Hob, his cane dragging languishingly slow on the stone behind him. The sound echoed throughout the room, causing Hob's heart to rabbit out of his chest. He could still feel the deep ache from the last beating, could still see the dark blue bruises marring his skin. "Don't!" The plea ripped itself out of his mouth before he could stop it. He wasn't even sure who he was begging, Roderick to hold off his fury, or Dream to remain silent and keep Jessamy safe. A nasty smile spread across the man's face. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Gadling. It's not me you need to convince if you don't want this. This is nothing personal." "Well, it feels fucking personal." Hob spat. White exploded across his vision as his body was thrown backwards. Sharp pain swept through his head, but so did fear. Is she still hidden? Hob forced his eyes open. He found Burgess looking over at Dream, who was studiously ignoring the scene on the floor in front of him. Relief flooded Hob. Jessamy was still hidden from Burgess. He slowly pushed his body backwards, further wedging her into the stone column. "Are you ready to talk yet, Lord of Dreams?" Burgess taunted. "Don't you dare do it, Dream!" he thought furiously. "No? Fine then." The next hit was to the bone of his shoulder, the next to his hip. This time, each swing of the cane felt more calculated, more purposeful. He aimed at the bony areas, the place where each connection would echo throughout the room, would cause the most visible injuries. And with each hit, Hob tried desperately to stay aware of his position and where Jessamy was. Don't hurt her, don't let her be seen. He had given up on holding back his cries and instead focused on not crushing the small hidden body as he instinctively tried to minimize the pain from each hit. Eventually the blows began to slow and finally came to a stop. "Well, Mr. Gadling, aren't you glad to know that he cares more about a bird than you?" Hob looked up, fury in his eyes, even as he gasped in pain. The other man simply looked back disinterestedly at him before turning and addressing Dream, who was still in the same position that he had been in when Burgess had first come down. His face was blank, but Hob could make out the way that his nails were dug into his legs, turning his knuckles white. "Can't let myself get too carried away now, can I?" He paused as if giving Dream a moment to respond. "I'll be back down tomorrow and every day until I find that damn bird. Let's just hope that Mr. Gadling here can last as long as your petty spite can." He then walked away, but not before delivering a hard kick to Hob's stomach, driving all the air from his lungs. "Come along, Alex. You can bring Mr. Gadling his dinner later." Hob wearily looked up at Alex, who looked horrified at the scene in front of him. The boy opened his mouth as if to say something, but seemed to think better of it, and then fled out of the room after his father. Once he was certain that Burgess had left the area, Hob looked back over towards Dream. The man was finally looking at him, stormy eyes furiously taking in his crumpled form. His nails were still dug into the meat of his legs, and he could make out the fine tremors of tension running through his whole body. The intensity was too much for Hob. He rolled and curled towards the stone column, placing his back to the glass ball. Jessamy slowly crawled up towards his chest, allowing him to bracket her in a dark cave of safety and warmth. She lay down next to him and rested her head on his arm, the light warm weight comforting in spite of the pain that bloomed from there. It broke something in him, something that the beating had yet to do, and Hob found himself crying silently, the tears falling onto the soft black silken feathers beneath him. He half expected her to pull away, but she only nestled herself closer. In return, he folded his arms gently over her, cradling her to him. He allowed himself to float, anchored only by the little puffs of warm air from her breath against his skin and the rapid but steady heartbeat underneath his hands.
Robert?
A worried voice and gentle hands shook Hob out of the meditative floating trance and brought him back to the conscious world. He managed to croak as Alex's face slowly came into focus before him. The boy looked wretched, his face as pale as the white cardboard box that he had brought down with him.
Oh, thank God!
The boy breathed, and Hob could see unshed tears forming in his eyes.
What's wrong?
He asked.
What's wrong?
The boy let out a slightly manic laugh.
I just watched my father almost beat you to death! Again!
Yeah, it does that. Hob was too tired for this, and he laid his head back down onto the cold stone floors. Alex didn't respond to that.
So what's in the box, anyways?
He asked.
Food? Medicine?
Alex responded.
The Magus wanted to make sure that you were lucid enough to participate in your meeting with him tomorrow.
Hob grimaced. All thoughtful of him.
Here's some ibuprofen. It should prevent any fevers and help with the pain.
The boy handed him 2 small tablets along with the bread and water that he had become accustomed to. However, missing from this little bundle was the chunk of meat. Hob lifted his eyebrows in askance and watched as 1,000 thoughts flickered across the boy's face until finally landing on determination.
Let me help,
Alex said, voice quiet but strong for the first time since Hob had met him.
Why?
Hob asked, skeptical, but he matched the volume of Alex, who clearly didn't want the guards to overhear them. Alex looked down at the ground, shame coloring his features.
You were right. I know that what the Magus is doing is wrong, and I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be him.
Hob stared at him for a moment, looking for any sign of lying, but all he found was chagrined honesty. He softened.
Okay, Alex, how can you help?
Alex looked up at him, grateful joy lighting up his face.
Let me take Jessamine out of here,
he said, motioning to the box next to him.
She kept herself safe for years outside of the manor, and if the Magus sees her outside, then he'll stop asking you about it.
Hob felt shocked. I'm not just going to abandon her, he hissed.
It's not abandoning her, it's freeing her,
Alex said frustratedly. He ran his hands over his face.
I saw her, Robert. When the Magus was attacking you, there was a moment where she was visible, and it's a fucking miracle that he was too busy beating the shit out of you to notice.
Hob felt the blood drain from his face.
You can't handle another beating like that, Robert.
The boy's voice was gentler now.
I can keep both her and you safe. Let me help.
Hob didn't like it at all. The idea of not knowing where Jessamine was, not knowing if she was safe, made his skin crawl. And if he was being perfectly honest, he didn't want to give away one of the only sources of comfort and companionship that he had in this horrible place. But Alex was still right. Hob wasn't willing to risk Jessamine's life for his own selfish desires. He looked down at Jessamine, who looked at them both, and then slowly but deliberately nodded. He then looked over at Dream, who gave the slightest nod in return. Hob then turned back to Alex.
It's Hob,
he said finally.
What?
My name.
I go by Hob.
Alex looked at him, confused.
I am trusting you, Alex. Please keep her safe.
Understanding bloomed warmly across the boy's face.
I promise, Hob. I will keep her safe.
Hob nodded and then checked to make sure that the guards were sufficiently distracted. He then picked up Jessamine, handing her gently over to Alex. The boy looked awed for a second, hugging her closely to himself, and then softly, if reluctantly, lowered her into the box. He then carefully picked up the box and made his way slowly out.
Be safe,
Hob whispered to himself. That night was horrible. Without Jessamine, the cold of the floor felt colder, the pain from his body felt deeper, and he felt more alone than he had at any other time since he'd been there. He missed her warm little breaths on his neck as she slept, the way she snuggled into him, the little staccato of her heart beating out a reminder that Hob wasn't alone. She's free, she's free, she's free, Hob repeated to himself like a mantra, hoping that it would be enough to push back his fear and misery. Yet the next morning, Roderick Burgess rejoined them. It was much earlier than Hob had expected, which he knew could not be good. Alex followed behind his father, sporting a bruised eye and swollen split lip that hadn't been there the night before. Hob stared at Alex, but the boy refused to meet Hob's eye, sending acidic fear pouring through his body like a wave. Burgess made his way towards Dream, an unholy glee lighting his face. "Look at what my son brought to me this morning." The man threw a black lump that landed on the floor with a wet bud.
No, it was covered in soaked black feathers. No, white fragments of bones and tendons shone a bright contrast in the stark light. No, the water underneath it turned a damning red. No, 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 no. Jessamy!
Hob's world broke. Sound disappeared. His lungs no longer obeyed him. He no longer felt the handcuffs on his wrists as he tore at the chains, although he wasn't sure if he was trying to get closer or run away. Everything narrowed down to that little broken body lying in front of him on the floor.
I was supposed to keep her safe.
It didn't even look like her anymore. How could this mangled sack of viscera be the same vibrant, loyal girl who had been comforting him just hours ago? How could she just be gone? Hob tore his eyes away from the sight, although it was seared into his mind, and landed on Dream. He was staring at the floor, eyes gazing uncomprehendingly at the heap, tears streaming freely down his face. Hob could almost hear Dream's anguished voice.
I almost lost you, little one.
You did this. This is your fault. Guilt and shame hit him like a physical blow. The limited control that he had regained over his lungs abandoned him, and he curled in on himself, unable to breathe. He had suffocated before, but at least then it had only been him who had suffered. You gave her away. She would still be alive if not for you. He was distantly aware that he was sobbing, although how he could make noise when his lungs wouldn't inflate was a mystery that he couldn't care to solve. The salt from his tears stung the cuts on his face and felt like deserved retribution for his failure. "Maybe next time you'll be a bit more cooperative, lest your friend here ends up like Jessamy." Burgess nudged at the body with his shoe. An overwhelming urge to scream at the man overtook Hob, but his voice refused to respond. It was wrong for that monster to be touching her, to desecrate her even more than she had already been. "Yo," Burgess said, pointing at one of the guards. "Clean that mess up." One of the men ran over and scooped up the mass, trying futilely to hold together the broken body and eschew feathers. Hob watched in horror as he dropped her into a small trash bin, the sound of her body hitting the metal echoing throughout the room. Roderick Burgess then turned around and placed his hand on Alex's shoulder. "Well done, son." Alex looked up in shock. "Your brother would have been proud of you." Roderick Burgess turned to head back upstairs, his hand still resting on Alex's shoulder. Something about the sight of the young Burgess with his father caused a feral rage to awaken within Hob. "You mothering bastard!" Hob snarled at Alex. "I fucking trusted you!" The older Burgess kept walking, and so did the younger one, despite a small hitch in his step. They left together, leaving Hob to stare brokenly at the bloody puddle left behind on the floor.